The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hello and welcome back to this third session at Join Digital episode 3, where we're going to be showing you the key parts of our, here at Venn, our omnichannel marketing automation tools. And more specifically, we're going to be showing you how to leverage insights from conversations that you have with customers through a voice of the customer program. And how then you can then use that within automated customer journeys so that you can optimize that experience that your customers have. Now, if you were on our session just before this one, we were talking about a guide to modern technologies to become a customer experience leader. So in that, we talked about the power of combining a voice of the customer system with a customer data platform and with your marketing automation. So this demo now is therefore, I guess, to show you the art of the possible. So in this example, we've ingested data into the Venn customer data platform using direct feedback and sentiment from Upland CXM, along with all the transactions, the behaviors, the personal data, all that great data that we're already collecting from our in our CRM, from the web, and from all our online and offline marketing channels. So what we're going to show you is how when that data is unified by the customer data platform within Venn, you can then look at the data, spot patterns in the data, but then more importantly to then orchestrate an omnichannel journey utilizing all of those online and offline marketing channels again. Now, before we begin, there is a questions box on the GoToWebinar technology we're using today. That allows you to post a question to myself and Jim. At any point, please feel free to type those in. We'll try and answer some of those at the end of the session. The final thing I'd like to say is that we have dropped a PDF copy of the Venn product brochure into the handouts section of the technology you're using. So there should be a section that says handouts, and in there you should be able to access that if you want to take that away afterwards. Okay, so I'm now going to pass the baton over to Jim Kelly. Jim is our principal consultant here at Venn, and he's going to be taking you through the Venn demonstration. Just as I transition over to Jim, we're just going to have a little change in the screen here, so bear with us while we do that. I'm just going to make you the presenter, Jim.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. Enjoying the sun, if you have them.
Okay, it should be coming.
Okay. Yeah, I've got it. Right. You should have my screen now.
Yep, that's looking good.
All right. Let me just get rid of that box. Okay. So I'm working in Chrome. You can use any browser of your choice. I'm just going to expand the screen so we get a little more space on screen. The key thing is data is data. When you're talking about a customer data platform and how it fits in with your world, as a marketeer, data is data. The question is whether you can use identity resolution appropriately and properly to merge that data into the view to make accurate, insightful decisions. So I've got all of my data here on the left-hand side, and it's structured in a way that I can use it most appropriately. So, for example, I've got all my customer data. I've got all my customer fields. I've also created what I would determine to be derived data, which is where I'm making a decision. So, for example, a customer type segment. That's based upon rules that I have given the system and given the customer data platform to make a decision around, are they a new customer, are they active, lapsed, or are they gone away? And that might be based on behavior. It might be based on empirical decisions, like how long it's been since they purchased, but it also could be on things like predictive modeling, and we will come on to that later. This is going to be very brief. It's going to be very overview. This is not a training course. It's not a tutorial. It's how would I use voice of the consumer if I were to engage that data and that channel and that tactic into my world. So you can see here that I have, for example, a date of birth. Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't, but I'm actually using date of birth because it's an easy indicator of an attribute at the customer profile level. And then the customer data platform is calculating the age of the individual every single day. It's recalculating that. So it's actually working out based on today's date compared to the date of birth, how many customers I have who are certain ages. And as I click more of these, you'll see that my percentage of my overall universe expands. Another thing that I've done is actually taken my age and using empirical insight as well as modeling, I've actually created some age band groups, and I've only done this to make analytics, segmentation, predictive modeling, just that little bit easier for me. But the capability for me to be able to use any of these pieces of data in any way is one of the key drivers behind being productive as a marketeer. So I've just double-clicked age band and brought up these age band areas that we talked about. Just going to remove my date of birth not captured because I'm not particularly interested where I don't have the information. And this is the count of individual customers that I have. This is the number of customers that fall into those age bands. It's a very quick, easy calculation. Additionally, I also have transactional information. I have my sales. I have the products that they purchased, the product category that they purchased them from. And this is a make-believe retail organization that predominantly deals in outdoor goods. I have product name, product codes, product SKU, prices, what they paid, any discounts. All my transactional information is ingested into my customer data platform in exactly the same way that you would ingest data from any data source whatsoever. But what this lets me do is to, as I mentioned earlier, derive information such as average spend. So if I drag on average spend, I can now see broken down by age group what my average spend is across those age groups. And again, I can do the same thing with any piece of data. And one of the things you will have seen as I'm actually navigating the information I have on the left is that in my sales transactional history, if you like here, I have a voice of consumer folder. And within here, we have the collection of information which has been gathered and passed through Upland CXM, voice of the consumer. It includes the key elements that they extrapolate from the text or any listener that they have that provides the ability to gather the information and the insight. So for example, when we're gathering sentiment, we're actually giving it a score based on the kind of sentiment which is in that text feed, or it could be in a voice feed. I'm sure you'll know if you've seen any of the Upland CXM webinars that there is a real drive behind using listeners, both in email, website, in-app, in-browser, online, and of course, in voice. So they can capture this information at the interaction point, and then Blue Venn can ingest that information. That also gives us the ability to capture insightful statements. So for example, delivery. Now, the customer might have used the phrase delivery, shipping, delivered. What it actually does is Upland CXM groups those together into a much more quantitative way in which I can analyze this information. So we have on screen here our age band and our weighted mean average. We can obviously view this any which way we want. There are no limitations as to how I can analyze this. But as I mentioned, this is really more about showing you the kind of capability that we have once we've ingested this data. So I've also dragged onto there the sentiment score. Now, I would recommend that when you're using the voice of the consumer, you attach it both to the transaction point. So what was the feedback on this transaction? What was the score? What was the sentiment? What was the insight was actually mentioned, because that enables you to analyze individual transactions. But I'd also be able to analyze this at the customer level and at the household level. And the ability within a customer data platform to move between multiple levels of relational data is really what we're talking about. So here you can see my average sentiment score by age band. But if I was to then drill further into that at the household level, etc., you actually might see that an individual in a household has made a complaint, but overall, the average in the household where I have multiple consumers being interacted with is actually an average is higher. I could then make a judgment call analytically or through machine learning as to whether the average mean sentiment for that property has been diminished by the negative response. So again, this is just data. So if I take a look at my insights and I double click them, you'll see that I'm now looking at insights for 7.5 million transactions. And this is the number of transactions that I've had. And again, if I drag on score, I can see the average feedback. No, the score itself is actually going to be averaged. So let me take that off. I'm dragging score here. The sentiment score is the one I want. Okay, so that'll give me the average sentiment for the transaction where they've been reported. Now I can see that my customer care has a relatively high score. It's over 3, 3 being the average, and that's just the way that Upland CXM actually feeds the information back to me. So you can see how there is no limitation as to how I can use this data. I can use it to navigate household level, product level, purchase level. I can look at individual transactions. I can add additional attributes, metrics, and spreads so that I can see what the average sentiment was for different product sales, etc. There really is no limitation. So, for example, if I wanted to take a quick look at the average, let's take a look for the customer breakdown. Excuse me. And let's take a look at this by VIP treatment segment. So I should have some segmentation in here, which allows me to see whether they are gold, silver, bronze, those sorts of things. I also have spend segment. So for example, if I bring up my average spend bands, I've got average spend, I've got total spend bands. All of these are standard things that you might expect to see from a well-deployed, customer data platform. So if I bring out my total spends, my bands, this is up to $50, over $3,000. These are the spends over time. Again, I can quite easily take a look at the average sentiment score for the individuals broken down by spend bands. And you can see that there's much of a muchness to it, and that's because I have a lot of customers in each of these bands. But the over 3,000 spend, it's a little bit higher. So perhaps that's an indication of why they're staying with me. Alternatively, perhaps that's an indication of some other element. Now, one of the easiest things that I can do, for example, is if I go back to my kind of dashboard here, and I do purchase date year. So I actually look at the year of purchase. You can see that I have customers that have purchased over time. So one of the things which I can do within Blue Venn is I can quickly create a Venn diagram to be able to access, for example, all of my customers that purchased in 2020, purchased in 2019, and purchased in 2018. The overlap in the center is actually those customers. These are my new customers. These are my lapsed customers down here. These are my returning customers, and these are my new. So one of the things that I might want to see is of my new customers, and let's just drag them out so that we have a list of them as individuals. I'm then going to open my voice of the consumer elements with my sentiment score, but I'm going to look at insights to actually see what kind of things my new customers are concerned about. So these are the insight reports that I've had. I'm going to select customer, and then I'm going to split my screen and drag my customers, the list that I created of people that have purchased year in, year out, and actually filter this list by those customers. So this will now represent the number of comments I've had from customers based upon the delivery, product, collection, those sorts of things. And again, if I go into sentiment, I can drag onto this the average sentiment score for those customers. So for my loyal customers, there actually is quite a big difference. They are less likely to be happy with the collection and the customer care than my average over time is. And one of the things about looking at average over time, again, you can create these views that help you to actually gain insight and understanding. So if I go to analytics, for example, into my reports, and I look at my voice of the consumer over time, you'll see what I mean about being able to plot this over time and being able to visualize how different elements here down the bottom, delivery, product, collection, the contact center, etc. But this is all done at the transaction level. This is not just analyzing the strategy behind gathering the voice of the consumer. This is actually analyzing the average transaction over time broken down by year and month for every single insightful comment that I've received. So one of the key benefits of being able to bring in this data is you're analyzing traffic at the consumer experience level, not just at your channel level. So it's not just about click-throughs and opens and all of those wonderful things that we look to at the channel. This is actually looking at the insights gathered from the customer feedback. And of course, if I want to look at any dips or drops or troughs, I can just click on any of these buttons and drag out the transactions that caused that negative response value, and then I can roll to customer and I can directly contact the individuals quite simply by turning it into a new campaign audience up here and then transforming that into my campaign canvas. So at any time, I can turn insight into action. This is the actual definition of the audience, where they've purchased for the last 3 years historically, but their average score is quite negative, and they've specifically talked about the customer care. So maybe I want to actually send them a particular email by dragging on the element itself and then choosing Upland CXM, for example, through my email output or any other email provider, and then feeding that information out to mail them something. I just want to get a little more advanced into the kind of thing that we're looking at. So let's close down a few of these. And I just want to take a moment to articulate that there are several key areas of functionality within Blue Venn, the marketing hub itself. And that includes the capability to be able to create models. So for example, if I wanted to take a model and try and predict customers who have a high propensity to give an average sentiment of 1, this enables me to drag in up to 100 attributes, variables, and behavioral metrics for the product to automatically tell me and then rescore on a schedule, effectively relearning every time it does it, which customer has a higher propensity based on behavior and the products they're buying of giving me a negative review. And perhaps I can chop this off at the pass. I can interject, I can intervene in the customer journey. This is all very advanced stuff. The capability is here to be advanced, but also to be very simplistic. So for example, if I look at my customer journeys, you might see that I have a next best action retail in here with a bunch of tactics and an overview. So let's take a quick look at the overview. The overview itself gives me the capability to have an air traffic control view of my entire customer journey. a part of it, of which will be the tactic to deploy voice of the consumer. What's key is that part of this journey includes a decision based upon the feedback, an automated real-time decision based upon how happy they are, combined with their lifetime value. And you will have seen us talk about that in the previous webinar that we did earlier on today, where we're talking about how you can combine different empirical insights and metrics to actually improve the customer experience, not just about the voice of the consumer, but using the insight gathered to make a better informed decision. So if we took a view of the overall tactics we have a spring-summer season. So if I double click on my spring-summer season, you'll see the campaign journey that I have in front of me. It looks complex. It's relatively straightforward when you step through it. I'm actually taking all of my customers that are in this case male. That is the target that I have for this example journey. And then I have a split based upon a bunch of models. Now, these models are predicting different things. They're not about product recommendation. They can be, but in this case, they're not. This is about what behavioral state is my consumer in. Are they lapsing? And I have my models here on the left-hand side. Before anybody asks that question, I have my next best action outcomes already scored here on the left. So the capability for me to combine them together and say, are they lapsing? Will they purchase in the next 2 weeks? Do they have a high propensity to purchase this season? A high propensity to respond to offer A or offer B and everybody else. So they're branching off depending upon which model has the highest propensity. So effectively, this is my next best action step. Based on their propensity to be or do any of these things, how do I treat them? Well, I have my link to reignite, that's a different tactic, to imminent purchase. I might treat them differently. Then I have a test where I know they're going to be purchasing this season based upon the model. So I'm going into wardrobe affinity. I'm actually looking at the kind of products they might buy in order to make a better informed decision about what to recommend them and when to communicate with them appropriately. And then I just have my send offer A, send offer B, and put them into an eternal loop of product recommendations until the machine learning automatically changes and tells me when they're going to purchase and how to treat them thereafter. Let's take a look at the wardrobe affinity element. So if I go into my tactics once again here on the left-hand side, and I go into wardrobe, the wardrobe affinity actually uses another set of models to use, again, affinity propensity. Excuse my spelling. Clearly had a bad morning. But it's looking at whether they're likely to buy products for themselves, for their entire family, or a mixture of generations, or just their children. Because of the products that we sell in this make-believe organization, that's a key divisor of how we build creative and how we articulate to people. So if I take mixed, for example, with a higher propensity to purchase for the entire family, parents, children, maybe others outside the family, I then pump them into wardrobe mixed. This wardrobe mixed tactic then breaks them out and branches them again. So this is like a multi-layer, multi-level journey orchestration that I'm actually doing here, which is quite high level, but ultimately it's asking, are they emailable? And this reference you will have seen in our previous webinar, where I'm emailing them if they're emailable. So do I have the consent? Are they opted in? Are they interested in these types of emails? They're all joined together as one big rule set. And then I'm saying no. And either way, the website is being personalized for known devices that I have for them. Using identity resolution, we can identify household, customer, device, all of those things, and make a decision at any point without creating a whole new campaign. The personalization of the web takes place, and then down here, I'm waiting for a response. Now, I can wait for 7 days, I can wait for 7 hours, I can wait for 7 minutes, or anything in between. It's entirely up to me. If they do make a purchase using the real-time trigger, I am then sending them through to the voice of the consumer tactic. So I've started with an aerial view, spring, summer season for males alone. Clearly, I would have multiple brands all injecting into the same environment. But here, just for males, for this example, the voice of the consumer tactic then takes the customer through the specific feedback that we talked about earlier. And that's where we're saying, depending upon their preferred way of talking to me, I'm going to engage them in that way. Is it app push, email, SMS? I'm then going to give them a voice of the consumer feedback questionnaire. It's not just a questionnaire. It's this open text box that Upland CXM provide, which then at real time passes the feedback and the sentiment score, and then tells me, again at real time, was it high feedback, mid feedback, or low feedback? And in this example, if it's low, i.e. negative sentiment, I want to feed them into this split based on spend. Are they high spend, mid spend, or low spend? And treat them differently, automating immediate, compensation, apologies, even if they're high or very high, feeding them through to my integrated outbound call center to instigate an outbound call. So essentially, you're not just using the data for automating journey decisions, but you're automating the exchange of, based upon the feedback, what should I be doing now? And this is one of the key criteria behind integrating any tactical change in how you deal with your customers. Can I use the information? Is it measurable? And am I using it in the most appropriate way? Of course, at the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, I can do things like this. I can aggregate that data, not just from the transaction level, which is where I'm actually capturing it, but I can aggregate it up to customer and then household, then site, and of course, the actual area in which they live. This example of a visualization that we're showing here, which is where I'm going to end, because I am mindful of time. There are some incredibly interesting things that I can show you around how you integrate this data and how it works. But if I just zoom in and I'll just wait for the internet lag to update and then update the screen, I've actually overlaid here the average high sentiment, mid sentiment, and low sentiment hotspots on the East Coast of the United States. So you can see how the data can be gathered at such a low level that it gives me the opportunity to see where I have hotspots and low spots, where I have negative feedback. Perhaps this helps me to make a decision on where I have a particular grouping. Are my delivery drivers doing their job properly? Is the shipping working? Is there a delay? Are there traffic issues? All of this information can be used to make a decision both at the individual MarTech, MarCom step, and also at the holistic decision touchpoint. And that kind of concludes a very whirlwind look at the kind of information that if you ingest the voice of the consumer information, you can have it all in one place and using BlueVenn make any decision you want to make. Just going to hand back to Anthony.
Lovely. Thanks, Jim. So hopefully, just check we're still all seeing the right thing. So we are. Okay, thanks, Jim. That was really great. So obviously that session really combines with the session we did earlier. Everything will be on demand, as you can see on the top of the screen. In case you missed the earlier session where we introduced the concept of putting voice of the customer data into your customer data platform and marketing automation practices, then everything will be on demand on Friday this week at bluevenn.com/join recordings. I did want to also say that, if you'd like to see more of the BlueVenn Marketing Hub, or you want to have a deep dive into the platform, then you can book a demo, obviously through the BlueVenn website, and the URL for that is bluevenn.com/demo, nice and simple. And as I said at the beginning, if you do want to go off and have a read for 20 minutes about BlueVenn, then there is a PDF version of our brochure in the handout section of the GoToWebinar technology. Then you can just go in there, click on that, and it will download. So Jim, before you go, I have a couple of questions. So we had a question here. Are the next best action models in BlueVenn built by a data analyst? Or can marketing create those, and can pre-built models be imported?
Yeah, both. So one, in fact, all three. So we have a data science team, which is part of our customer success team, which are on hand to help you traverse any knowledge gaps you have. So if you want to build predictive models and combine them together to create the next best action decisioning, we can help you get that right if you've never done it before. Or, it's pretty straightforward, though. One of the key core competencies of our platform, strategically, we built the platform to be usable by the average marketeer, in quotes. So as long as you are data aware and you understand the connection between data and the customer experience, we try to make it as easy and as non-technical as possible. So you can predict any outcome. That can be behavioral, descriptive, predictive in itself. You can predict a potential outcome based on purchase, offer, link clicking, lead nurturing, anything. And it's just a case of following the same process to drag and drop into the user interface the attributes that you think are most relevant. The product will then choose a group of attributes which are most indicative to predict that. And then you just score your customers. And using drag and drop in the exact same way that I just did, you then build out the journey, taking into account the statistical response of the model. So in essence, it's like asking the platform, what should I do next? Or what's the propensity of the customers to actually do this thing? It's pretty straightforward stuff. And thirdly, of course, the third part of your question was, is it black box? Was that right? Have I missed?
The final part of that question was, can you import pre-built models, I guess, from other platforms?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, most predictive tools allow you to export the model definition in what's called polynomial form, and we can ingest polynomial form script. So yeah, you can paste it directly in. If it's been built by a third party, an agency, or an internal team, or maybe you've got an in-house data statistician who actually builds them for you, you can ingest them directly into the platform. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jim. And one other question here before we close off this session, and I think this is quite a pertinent one right now. We've recently launched a new online service, and we know that a lot of our heavy offline customers are looking, but need to link this back to our contact database, which goes back many years. Is it possible to import all this data and link the two?
Yes, so that's actually quite a big topic at the moment certainly within retail, is I'm quite sure the audience knows, is that not every organization out there has an online presence. And if they do, potentially the online presence is not as big or as data aware as the offline presence. And one of the key things that we're asked is, most recently, obviously in the past month, maybe 6 weeks, is I have a wealth of information. What can I do with it? We are moving to more of a online presence. Stores are closing, or outlets are less prevalent. They're having less visitors. So what I would say is, have your data briefly looked at. Just really have an open conversation with a provider that understands data. BlueVenn's been around for a long time. We understand what's possible and what's not. We also understand why things like Google Analytics really can't be used out of the box to identify an individual. It identifies a device. and we're pretty good at understanding what can and what can't be done. That initial feasibility discussion does feature in the marketing transformation webinar we had earlier on this week, or rather last week, where we actually talked about you need to identify that it's actually feasible before you undertake it. I would say, yes, all data can be ingested, structured or unstructured. The question is whether it can be joined together and use identity resolution to make that connection. So I would speak to an experienced organization to help you understand whether or not it's feasible. But if it is, of course, feasible, then yeah, absolutely. You can load historical data as much as you want, ingest it, join it together, and make your decisions.
Great, thank you, Jim. Okay, so that's all we've got time for this session. We have another one in 24 minutes from now. So that's 4:30 UK time, 5:30 Central European time, and that it will be 11:30 Eastern time in America. That next session is entitled To CDP or Not to CDP, where Matt Diamond is going to be back with us to explore 5 different ways that you can use to unify disconnected customer data. So for Gareth, who asked that last question, perhaps you want to come back for that one. That might help. Okay, and I just want to remind you of the things that are on screen. So, we do have another episode of Join next week, episode 4. So that will be 4 weeks. We've been running these, which is fantastic. As you can see on screen, we've got 4 sessions from partners. So registration for that will be available tonight. So we will let you know by email, but of course, check back tonight if you're interested in registering for next week. So finally, I just want to say, thanks to Jim. Thanks for taking us through that demo. That was fascinating. Thanks to everyone online who's watching, who's logged into this today. And thank you if you're on demand watching it as well. Hope to see you with me and Matt Diamond for the next session. And you will get a reminder, as I'm sure you're aware by now, you'll get a reminder of that session 10 minutes before it begins. Okay, so thanks again and goodbye.